They followed the trail until it simply stopped. No turn, no break, no slope. Just nothing. A sheet of wind-hardened snow, smooth as glass, where the girl's small footprints had vanished. The soldier stared in disbelief, his breath fogging in the cold air. But the dog kept barking, low, sharp, urgent, at the base of a drift, like he knew. Like something, or someone, was beneath. The storm had calmed just enough for the search party to move in. Lieutenant Daniel Carter squinted through the gray haze, his breath fogging in the frozen air as he scanned the snow-covered trail. His gloved hand clutched the leash of his dog, Shadow, a German shepherd bred for war but trained for rescue. Every inch of the forest was blanketed in a thick layer of snow, erasing direction, sound, and hope. They had been following the footprints for over a mile now, tiny, staggered impressions that caught through the powder like whispers. The girl's name was Emily, 6 years old, last seen in a red coat near the edge of her family's vacation cabin. That had been 3 hours ago. And now, the footprints were gone. Not faded. Not veered off. Gone. Like the storm had lifted her from the earth. Daniel dropped to one knee, brushing his gloved fingers across the snow. There was no dip, no break in the surface, just a wide patch of wind-hardened white. She didn't just vanish, he muttered to himself, scanning for any signs. Shadow didn't wait. He charged forward without hesitation, dragging the leash tight before Daniel released it. The dog stopped near a drift, a large one. Taller than most, its slope curved in a way that didn't quite match the natural wind patterns. His ears went stiff. His nose twitched. Then he barked. Loud. Sharp. Focused. Daniel froze. Shadow? What is it? The dog didn't move. He barked again, and then began to dig, paws flinging snow behind him like a machine. The soldier rushed forward, kneeling beside the dog, brushing snow away with his own hands. Each breath came shorter now, not from the cold, but from the rising panic clawing at his chest. The snow beneath them didn't feel like solid ground. It sank slightly, collapsing inward. He pointed his flashlight down and saw it. Red. Not blood. Fabric. A sleeve. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Emily. Shadow whimpered, then barked again, more frantic now. Easy, boy. We've got her. We've got her, Daniel whispered, more to himself than the dog. He pulled out his radio, fumbling to press the button with stiff fingers. Command, this is Bravo 2. I've got visual confirmation. Possible contact beneath snowdrift, northeast quadrant. Requesting medevac standby. Static. Then a voice. Copy that, Bravo 2. Hold your position. Back up en route. But they didn't have time to wait. Not in this cold. Not with snow this deep. And not with a child buried alive. Daniel looked at Shadow. The dog stared back, his eyes wide, filled with urgency, but also trust. Like he was asking, "What now, partner?" Daniel gritted his teeth, pulled off his jacket, and started to dig. Daniel's fingers scraped against the hard-packed snow, the cold biting through even his tactical gloves. Shadow kept digging beside him, tireless and determined, as if every layer of snow removed was another second closer to saving her. The red fabric grew clearer now, definitely a sleeve. Small. Torn at the cuff. Daniel's heart pounded harder than the shovel strikes he wished he had. This wasn't just a false alarm. This was real. Emily, he shouted, his voice cracking as the cold tightened around his throat. Emily, can you hear me? No answer. Shadow let out a low growl, then pressed his ear to the snow. It was something he did when listening for heartbeat vibrations, training from his combat days in Afghanistan. He froze for a moment, then barked once, sharply, and resumed digging with renewed intensity. She's in there, Daniel whispered, mostly to himself. Alive, she has to be. He cleared more snow, finally revealing the edge of a child's shoulder. Beneath that was her face, eyes shut, lips pale, but visible. Emily. His breath caught. For a moment, everything around him, the wind, the flurries, the ache in his back, faded. Just that little face, so still, so quiet, and so heartbreakingly alone. He leaned in, brushing more snow from her face. "Emily," he said gently, "it's okay. I'm here." Still no response. But he noticed something, her eyelids fluttered. A flicker. And then, a shallow breath. She was alive. "Shadow, stay," he barked, reaching for his radio again with shaking hands. "Command, this is Bravo 2. I have confirmed contact. The child is alive." Repeating, "Emily is alive but unresponsive. Initiating hypothermia protocol. I need that medevac ASAP." The voice on the other end crackled through the static. "Roger that, Bravo 2. Hello's 5 minutes out. Hold position. Hold position." Daniel looked around. Snowdrifts all sides. Visibility less than 40 feet. And a 6-year-old child clinging to life with nothing but a thin coat and her will to survive. He knew 5 minutes could be the difference between brain damage and recovery. He unzipped his vest, shrugging off his warmest thermal layer and wrapped it tightly around her. Then, gently, he lifted her out of the hole, careful not to jolt her. She was light. Too light. Shadow whined as he leaned in close, licking her cheek once before sitting back like a sentry. "Good boy," Daniel whispered. "You did it." He cradled Emily against his chest, his breath now steaming wildly as he tried to warm her with body heat. "Hang on, sweetheart," he whispered. "We've got you. Shadow found you. You're safe now." But deep inside, something nagged at him. The trail ended too cleanly. The drift was too unnatural. Like it had been formed deliberately. He looked back toward the trees, eyes narrowing. Had she just wandered into the storm and collapsed? Or had someone helped her disappear? He didn't like the thought. Not yet. But something about the way her footprints vanished mid-step, it didn't feel right. He tucked that thought away. Above, the thrum of rotor blades began to echo faintly through the forest. The medevac was coming. The rotor blades sliced through the sky like thunder. Daniel held Emily tight to his chest as the medevac team touched down in a narrow clearing between the trees. Snow blasted outward in violent gusts, pelting his face, but he didn't flinch. His eyes stayed fixed on the girl, her lips still blue, her breath shallow, but steady. Shadow sat beside him like a statue, his gaze flicking between the soldier and the snow-covered treeline. The medics rushed out, 2 men and a woman, carrying a stretcher and a heated emergency blanket. "Let's move," one of them shouted over the wind. Daniel gently passed Emily over. 6 years old. Found under a drift. She's got a pulse, but it's weak. Been under for at least 30 minutes, maybe longer. The female medic was already checking vitals. "She's lucky," she said. "But she needs warmth, fast." Shadow stepped forward, tail stiff, nose twitching. He wasn't focused on Emily anymore. His attention was fixed back on the drift they'd just dug her from. Daniel noticed. "What is it, boy?" Shadow growled low. Not a warning, not a fear response, something else. A signal. A clue. The medevac team moved to load Emily into the chopper, and Daniel waved them off. "I'll stay. I've got another sweep to do." "You sure?" the male medic shouted. "Storm's coming back. I'll be fine. Go!" The chopper lifted, its light growing smaller in the thickening snow as it banked west toward the hospital. And then, silence again. Just the wind. Just the woods. Just Daniel and Shadow. He turned back to the drift. "Let's check again, buddy." They stepped carefully over the partially dug trench where Emily had been buried. Daniel crouched, examining the base of the snowbank. He pushed snow aside, slowly, methodically, and uncovered something odd, a sharp indentation, square-shaped, not natural. About 6 inches deep. Like something heavy had been pressed into the snow. A crate? A box? He looked up. The snow around the base of the drift was too perfect. Smooth. Artificial. It hadn't just piled up here. It had been moved. Or placed. That's when he noticed Shadow wasn't beside him anymore. The dog had wandered 10 yards off the trail, nose pressed to the ground, sniffing with surgical focus. His body went rigid. Then he barked, just once, sharp and loud. Daniel was on his feet instantly, moving toward the sound. Shadow. What do you have? The dog didn't move. Daniel knelt beside him and looked down. Tracks. Human ones. Fresh. Not from Emily. Bigger. Heavier. Heading away from the drift, deeper into the trees. And they weren't alone. Another set of tracks ran parallel, wider, like a sled or a plastic bin had been dragged across the snow. Daniel's pulse jumped. What the hell? He took out his field notepad and began sketching a rough layout, placement of the drift, location of the tracks, and their direction. Then he pulled out his radio. Command, this is Bravo 2. Crackling silence. Repeat, command, this is Bravo 2. I need a secondary search team dispatched to Quadrant Echo 4. I have fresh tracks, adult-sized, leading away from the recovery site. Possible involvement in the girl's disappearance. Could be foul play. No response. Just static. Of course. The storm had circled back. Daniel looked down at Shadow. The dog's eyes were locked in the direction of the tracks, tail stiff, ears twitching, like he already knew what Daniel was going to say. Let's follow. They moved fast, but careful. The forest was growing darker as the storm rolled back in. The flurries thickened, and the footprints became harder to follow. But Shadow never hesitated. His nose was a compass, locked in. They pushed through dense brush, slid over frozen roots, and ducked under low branches until they reached a small clearing. At the center stood an old ranger station, abandoned years ago. Its windows were shattered. The door swung open on rusted hinges. Daniel raised his hand, signaling Shadow to stay. He drew his sidearm slowly and stepped through the door. The smell hit him first. Wet wood. Mold. And something else, something sharp and chemical. He scanned the room. A cot. A broken lantern. An old metal desk. And in the far corner, a plastic storage bin, partially buried in snow that had drifted in through a broken wall. He approached, heart pounding. He knelt beside it. Empty. But the inside was lined with a blanket. Red fibers, same as Emily's coat. Daniel's breath hitched. This was where she'd been. Not lost. Placed. Hidden. Someone put her here, he said aloud. And then, they covered the trail. He stood, suddenly alert. Which meant someone could still be out there. Daniel stood still in the dark of the ruined ranger station, the wind moaning through the shattered window like a warning. The bin at his feet had been carefully placed. The blanket inside wasn't crumpled, it was tucked, almost like someone had tried to make the child comfortable. But there were no signs of food. No water. No heater. Whoever had hidden her here didn't plan on keeping her warm. Just keeping her out of sight. He stepped back, eyes scanning the room again. Nothing else. No gear. No footprints inside the cabin, just the ones outside, now vanishing fast under fresh snowfall. Shadow let out a low growl from the doorway. He wasn't barking this time. He was listening. What is it? Daniel whispered, moving to the door. Then he heard it too. A faint crunch. Not far. Maybe 30, 40 feet. Another crunch. He froze. So did Shadow. Someone was moving out there. Daniel holstered his sidearm, not because the threat was over, but because a gun drawn in a blizzard was worse than no gun at all. He stepped outside slowly, boots sinking into fresh snow, ears tuned like radar. Shadow didn't bark. He moved silently, padding ahead in a slow arc toward the sound. His ears were perked. Nose twitching. Muscles tight. They circled the back of the station, and Daniel stopped dead in his tracks. A new set of footprints. Very recent. Heading away from the ranger station, deeper into the trees, toward a slope that led to the ridge. Daniel's mind raced. Whoever this was, they weren't running. The prints were clean, even, deliberate. Which meant whoever had buried Emily in the drift was calm enough to walk away from it. And that meant they weren't just some panicked bystander. They were in control. He pulled out his map, marked the ranger station, and traced the direction the prints were headed, toward an old fire road, long since closed off due to washouts. It was the kind of place only locals would know. And only someone with a plan would use. He clicked the radio again. "Command, this is Bravo 2, I need an update on comms." "Copy?" "Nothing. Just wind." He looked down at Shadow. The dog's eyes flicked from the prints back to Daniel, then back again. Waiting. "Let's move." They began to climb, slow at first. The slope wasn't steep, but it was slick. Ice had formed under the snow from earlier melt, and every step risked sliding backward. Daniel moved cautiously, using branches for balance. Shadow trotted just ahead, his nose leading. Halfway up the hill, the prince stopped again. Vanished. Daniel swore under his breath. It was the same trick. Whoever he was chasing knew how to move in snow. This wasn't some desperate abductor crashing through trees. This was someone with military or wilderness experience, someone who knew how to mask their path. But then Shadow did something unexpected. He veered off the trail completely and started up a rock ledge on the left. Daniel followed. At the top was a narrow plateau. The trees thinned here, exposing a clearing with an old trapper shack. It was nearly invisible from below, nestled into the ridge, covered in snow and camouflaged by branches. The front door was closed. Not locked. Not broken. Just waiting. Daniel signaled Shadow to flank, approaching the door slowly. He reached for the handle, heart pounding, finger near his holster. Then he stopped. A piece of string was stretched across the base of the door, barely visible in the snow. A tripwire. He backed off instantly. Someone had booby-trapped the front entrance. He circled the shack, eyes sharp. Shadow followed his lead. At the rear, he found a broken window, just enough room to peer inside. Dark. Dusty. Empty. No. Not empty. In the corner was a duffel bag, military style. And on the table next to it, a child's drawing. Crayon on paper. A little girl in a red coat standing next to a dog. Daniel stared, throat dry. This wasn't random. Someone had been watching. Someone who knew Emily. His instincts flared. Whoever he was tracking wasn't gone. They were close. Too close. Daniel crouched beside the shack, heart pounding harder than the wind. He stared through the cracked window at the table, at the drawing made with childish strokes. A stick figure of a girl in a red coat. And beside her, a dog with exaggerated ears and a long tail. It was unmistakably Shadow. His breath fogged the glass as 1,000 questions collided in his head. How did Emily draw this? How long had she been here? Who was she with, and where was he now? Shadow let out a faint huff, shifting his weight. Not a bark. Not a growl. Just tension. Daniel backed away from the window and took out his phone. No signal. Still. He tried texting the coordinates anyway, praying the message would cue once service returned. Then he turned to the tripwire again, just a thin nylon thread tied between the base of the door and a bent nail on the wall. He followed the line to the inside, and saw the glint of a grenade pin hanging from a string. Classic trick. Open the door too far, and boom. Daniel exhaled slowly. He circled the shack one more time and noticed something strange near the back wall, a square impression in the snow, not footprints, just a flat indent. Maybe 4 by 4 feet. He knelt and brushed away the snow, revealing a hatch. Old. Wood reinforced with metal. A lock had been sawed off. Recent work. Splinters still clean. Shadow's ears perked. His body stiffened. Someone had gone down there. Daniel hesitated, then slowly lifted the hatch. A ladder descended into pitch black. Cold air drifted up, damp, stale, the smell of earth and rust. He clicked on his flashlight and began to climb down. The narrow tunnel was made of concrete and wood, part of the original fire watch system, now long forgotten. Roots poked through cracks. Water dripped steadily from above. At the bottom, he found a small bunker, barely larger than a bedroom. Inside was a cot, 2 empty water jugs, a bucket, and a rusted kerosene lamp. But more importantly, boot prints. Size 11, deep, pointed toward the ladder, then gone. He scanned again. One boot print had a heel drag. Like someone left in a hurry, or limping. Then he found something wedged behind the cot, a laminated ID badge, cracked down the middle. Half the name was missing. But the picture showed a man in a forest ranger uniform. And the part of the name still visible? Elson. Daniel's eyes narrowed. His mind clicked into overdrive. Nelson. There had been a ranger named Brent Nelson reported missing over a year ago. Vanished during a forest fire evacuation. Rumor was he went off-grid. Mental breakdown, they'd said. What if he didn't? What if he stayed? And what if he'd been watching this forest ever since? He climbed out of the bunker fast, adrenaline surging. If this man had taken Emily, placed her in that bin, hidden her under snow, then he was no longer just a mystery. He was a suspect. Daniel didn't wait. Shadow, track, he commanded, pointing toward the trees behind the shack. The dog leapt forward, nose pressed low, body moving like a missile. Within seconds, he cut through a thicket and vanished around the ridge. Daniel followed fast. They emerged into a shallow gully, and Shadow stopped suddenly. Barked twice. Daniel skidded to a halt beside him, and froze. Smoke. A thin trail rising from behind a boulder up ahead. Not wood smoke. Chemical. Faint but wrong. Daniel advanced slowly. And then he saw it. A man. Middle-aged. Unshaven. Ragged forest jacket over a ranger shirt. Limping slightly. Kneeling beside a campfire. Stirring something in a dented tin pot. A .22 rifle leaned against a tree. He hadn't seen them yet. Daniel stepped out, gun drawn. Don't move. The man's head whipped up. His eyes were wild, but not surprised. Almost like he'd been expecting this. Don't move, Daniel repeated, weapon steady, feet locked into a defensive stance. The man didn't reach for the rifle. He didn't run. He simply stared at Daniel, eyes glassy, face chapped from cold, smoke curling around him like a ghost. Then, in a gravel-dry voice, he asked, "Did you find the girl?" Daniel didn't blink. "She's safe." A flicker of something crossed the man's face, relief? Regret? He nodded slowly and sat back on his heels. "I figured you would. Dog's got a hell of a nose." Shadow remained in a low crouch, hackles raised, unmoving. Daniel didn't lower his weapon. "Brent Nelson?" The man nodded again. "You've been missing over a year. And now a 6-year-old girl turns up buried in a snowbank near an old ranger station. You want to explain how that happened?" Nelson looked away, his gaze sinking into the fire. "I didn't hurt her. I found her. Daniel's finger tensed slightly on the trigger. You found her? Alone? In the middle of the woods? And you just, what? Tucked her into a plastic bin and buried her under snow? I saved her. Nelson snapped, suddenly angry. She was out there alone, crying. I heard her. Middle of the night. No coat, no boots. Just standing in the snow like she didn't know where she was. Daniel narrowed his eyes. And instead of calling it in, you buried her alive? I hid her, Nelson corrected. It's not safe out here. Not anymore. He tapped his temple. They're watching. Who's watching? Nelson didn't answer. His eyes drifted back to the flames. People. Planes. Lights at night. You think the storm is natural? It isn't. It's a curtain. Daniel's jaw tightened. Delusion. Paranoia. But the facts were still muddy. Emily hadn't wandered into the woods on her own, that much was clear. She'd known Shadow's name. She'd drawn a picture. Someone had shown her kindness. And someone had hidden her under a drift like a secret meant to be found later. But the girl had survived. That mattered. Why didn't you bring her to a hospital? Daniel asked. I was going to. Just needed to wait. Until the watchers left. Daniel motioned with his gun. Stand up. You're coming with me. Nelson slowly rose, his hands visible, his movements sluggish from cold. You're military? Former. You won't believe me. I don't have to. Daniel stepped forward and cuffed him with the set clip to his belt. Nelson didn't resist. As Daniel turned to lead him back toward the shack, a voice drifted out from the trees. A woman's voice. Nelson? Daniel's blood ran cold. He turned. Shadow growled. Another figure appeared between the pines, slender, bundled in a white parka, face hidden by a scarf and snow goggles. She held a walkie-talkie in one hand. A large hunting knife hung from her belt. Who are you? Daniel called out. She stepped forward. She's mine. The girl. Emily. Nelson stiffened. No. No, she's not. Don't listen to her. She's one of them. Daniel tightened his grip on Nelson and turned to the woman. Put your hands where I can see them. She didn't. Instead, she dropped the walkie into the snow and said softly, you weren't supposed to find her. That's when Daniel noticed her boots, military grade, but no treads. Snowshoes. No visible tracks. The kind of footwear that leaves no trace. Nelson screamed, she's the one. She brought the girl. She left her there like bait. Daniel's heart pounded. Shadow lunged forward, barking now, ferocious. The woman raised her hand, not in surrender, but in a slow reach for her belt. Daniel made a split-second decision. Shadow, hold! He aimed, eyes locked on the woman's movements. But she didn't draw the knife. She simply said, I told them you'd come. I told them he'd smell her. Then she ran. Not away, but into the trees, down the ridge. Daniel cursed. He couldn't chase her and manage Nelson at the same time. But Shadow could. Shadow, track and circle. Go! The dog tore through the snow, a blur of black fur and trained instinct. Daniel turned to Nelson. Back to the shack. Move. The cold clawed at Daniel's face as he pushed Nelson ahead, heart pounding harder with every crunch of snow beneath their boots. Behind them, the forest howled, wind shaking branches, and somewhere in that chaos, Shadow was chasing her. The woman in white. The one who left no footprints. The one who spoke like she planned it all. Daniel pressed his comm again. Still dead. He'd gone too far off-grid. And now it was just him, a delusional ranger, and a missing child caught in a blizzard's teeth. Back in the shack, Daniel ordered. Nelson stumbled over a buried root but caught himself. "She's not alone," he muttered. "She never is. She's one of the whisperers. They come when it storms." Daniel ignored him. Part of his brain filed the ramblings away, the other part listening, always listening, for signs of shadow. A bark. A growl. Anything. They reached the shack. Daniel pulled Nelson toward the broken window instead of the tripwired door. He wasn't risking entry. "Inside," he said, nodding toward the opening. Nelson hesitated. "She'll come back." Daniel gave him a shove. "Exactly why you're going in." Nelson crawled through. Daniel followed. The moment they were inside, he wedged a piece of furniture against the window and moved to the table, the one with Emily's drawing. He picked it up again. The crayon marks were faint but clear. And something about the way the dog was drawn, it was looking over its shoulder. Daniel turned the paper over. The back was blank. He unfolded the crumpled blanket Nelson had left in the bin. Inside, a second sheet of paper. Torn. Wet, but still legible. This one wasn't a drawing. It was a note. Scrawled in a child's hand. She said, "Don't talk. If I be quiet, the dog will come. I miss Mommy." Daniel's grip tightened. Whoever that woman was, she had kept Emily alive, but terrified. He spun back to Nelson. "How did she find you?" "I don't know," Nelson whispered, now curled in the corner like the walls were closing in. "She showed up last week. Said she was a nurse. Lost. I let her in." "She wasn't lost," Daniel said flatly. "She was casing the area." Nelson nodded. "I think she was listening to me. I talk to Emily, sometimes. Maybe she heard." A sudden bark split the air. Sharp. Focused. Close. Shadow. Daniel moved fast, yanking the barrier from the window and crawling back into the snow. He left Nelson inside. He wasn't going anywhere. His leg was too weak. His mind too frayed. "Shadow." Daniel called. A second bark. Then the flash of black fur barreling out from between the trees. Shadow slid into view, panting, eyes wide, and he wasn't alone. Between his teeth, dangling from the edge of her coat sleeve, was Emily's red mitten. Daniel dropped to one knee. "Where is she, boy? Where's Emily?" Shadow turned, gave one final bark, and bolted toward the west trail. Daniel didn't hesitate. He followed. They moved fast now, Daniel's legs burning as he pushed through thickening drifts. The wind cut visibility to nearly nothing. But Shadow didn't stop. Up ahead, faint tracks began to form, human, light, fast. No snowshoes anymore. The woman was running. A sharp slope dropped toward a frozen creek. Daniel slipped once, caught himself, and kept moving. Then he saw it. A figure. Crashing down toward the water. Slipping. Daniel raised his voice. "Stop! Don't move!" But she didn't stop. She hit the ice, tried to cross it. Shadow launched forward. A crack rang out. Then another. Daniel's breath caught. The woman screamed once, and vanished beneath the ice. For a split second, the world stood still. The woman's scream echoed across the frozen creek, then nothing. No splash. No flailing. Just a violent crack in the ice, and then, silence. Daniel skidded to the edge of the frozen bank, heart thundering in his ears. The snowstorm clawed at his back, white flakes swirling like ash as he scanned the shattered spot in the ice. "Shadow, back," he shouted. The dog stopped inches from the edge, paws slipping slightly as he turned to obey. Daniel dropped to his stomach and inched forward, feeling the fragile surface groan beneath his weight. The fracture where she fell had already begun to freeze over, thin layers of water crystallizing fast in the brutal cold. He peered into the hole. A face stared back. Pale. Still. Just beneath the surface. The woman's eyes were wide open, lips parted, and a final breath never exhaled. Her scarf had floated free, her goggles gone, her hand outstretched like she was trying to reach up, even as the current tugged her deeper. Daniel reached instinctively, but stopped. It was too late. Her body shifted slightly, caught in an undercurrent, and disappeared into darkness. Daniel closed his eyes for half a second. Not for her. But for Emily. It was over. The one who left no footprints would never walk again. He backed away from the creek, motioning to Shadow, who followed closely. The dog nudged Daniel's leg, sensing the shift in energy, then glanced behind them, toward the ridge. They still had to get back to Nelson. And Emily needed warmth. Now. Daniel checked his GPS again. Still dead. But he remembered the ridge's direction. If they looped around the west slope, they'd be back at the shack in under 15 minutes. Or so he thought. Until they crested the hill and saw smoke. The shack was on fire. Daniel's boots hit the ground running, snow spraying with each step as he bounded down the incline toward the small cabin now spewing black smoke into the sky. Shadow raced ahead, barking wildly. No! Daniel roared. The flames hadn't reached the treeline yet, but the shack's roof was already partially collapsed. Ember flakes danced in the air. He reached the side and kicked open the door, flames burst outward with a hiss. Inside, the heat was unbearable. The blanket. The drawing. The evidence, all gone. But Nelson. Brent. No answer. Daniel squinted through the smoke and saw movement. In the corner, slumped low, coughing violently, was the old ranger. Alive. Barely. Daniel charged in and dragged him out by the shoulders, coughing as he went, lungs burning. Shadow barked until they were both clear, then circled them protectively. Daniel dropped to his knees beside Nelson. Did you do this? Nelson shook his head violently, eyes wide with fear. She came back. What? She was here. After you left. She was watching. I didn't stop her, I couldn't. Daniel stared back at the inferno. If that woman made it out of the ice. No. That was impossible. Unless. There was another. The flames crackled behind them, painting the snow in shifting reds and blacks. Daniel's breath came in short, sharp bursts, half from exertion, half from something darker rising in his chest. He'd watched that woman disappear under the ice. He'd seen her face go still. But Nelson's words haunted him. She came back. And if that wasn't possible, then someone else was out here. Shadow paced in tight circles now, nose to the wind, tail stiff. The dog kept glancing toward the north tree line. Low growls rolled in his throat. Daniel didn't wait. He knelt beside Nelson. Can you walk? Nelson coughed hard, soot clinging to his skin. I don't think so. Then stay put. Someone will come for you. Daniel reached into his belt pouch and tossed him a heat pack. Keep this against your chest. Nelson caught it, barely. You're going after her, aren't you? Daniel didn't answer. He turned to Shadow. Find. The dog didn't hesitate. He took off toward the tree line, leaving only his prints in the fresh snow. Daniel followed close, senses tuned, mind racing. They didn't go far, just over the next ridge, where the wind had flattened the snow into hard, crusted sheets. And there, in the clearing, stood a second figure. Not the woman. A man. Tall. dressed in a black coat. No hat. No goggles. Just cold, clear eyes staring right at Daniel. Between them, the wind dropped. The air grew dead quiet. Daniel raised his voice. "Identify yourself." The man tilted his head. "She said you were persistent." Daniel lifted his rifle. "Hands where I can see them." The man didn't move. "You should have left the girl." "Where is she?" Daniel barked. "She's gone." Shadow growled again, low and steady. "Gone where?" Daniel demanded. The man smiled faintly. "She was never supposed to leave the snow." Something behind Daniel shifted, a soft crunch in the ice. He spun, heart leaping into his throat. Emily. Standing 20 feet away. Wrapped in a thick coat far too large for her, scarf dragging, boots clumsy in the snow. Her eyes locked with Daniel's, and widened in recognition. Daniel. Then, a gunshot. The man in black fired. But not at Daniel. At Emily. Daniel threw himself sideways, raising his rifle in one fluid motion and returning fire. The round missed the man by inches, but he dropped fast and rolled behind a frozen stump. Shadow lunged across the clearing. Emily screamed. More shots tore through the air. Daniel moved low, fast, between trees, angling toward the girl. "Emily, run to me." She didn't move, frozen in fear. The man fired again. Daniel dropped flat behind a snowbank, shoulders slamming the ice. He popped up, fired twice, one round grazed the tree behind his target. The man ducked again. Then Daniel saw him retreating, melting into the forest. "Shadow, track him." Daniel roared. The dog sprinted after the fleeing shape. Daniel ran to Emily. She was crying now, eyes wide, body trembling. "You're okay," he said, scooping her up. "I've got you. You're safe." "No," she whispered, clutching his jacket. "She's still out here." Daniel carried Emily in one arm, rifle slung back across his shoulder, as they crossed through the snow toward a dense thicket. Shadow had chased the shooter into the woods, but the forest had gone eerily still again. No more shots. No more movement. Just the moan of the wind curling through the trees like a warning. Emily gripped him tightly. "He wasn't the first one," she whispered. Daniel glanced down. "What do you mean?" "There were others. Sometimes they brought food. Sometimes they just watched." Daniel's jaw clenched. This wasn't just a kidnapping. It was part of something bigger. Something darker. And that shack, that burned-out little hut in the woods, wasn't a hideout. It was a way station. He tapped his radio again. Finally, a weak signal chirped through. "Bravo team, come in. I have the girl." Static. Then. "Copy that, Bravo 1. We have your beacon. ETA 10 minutes. Daniel exhaled slowly. Rescue was close. But 10 minutes could be a lifetime out here. Shadow returned just then, emerging from the trees, silent, tail low, ears perked back. Daniel met his eyes. "You lost him?" Shadow whined and sat near Emily, pressing close to her side like a bodyguard. That told Daniel everything. The shooter had vanished. Daniel led them back toward the original snowdrift, where Shadow had first barked, where the footprints had vanished. As they approached, Emily tugged his jacket. "She's under there," she whispered. Daniel slowed. "Who?" Emily looked at the drift, eyes far away. "The first one." Daniel's stomach dropped. He knelt by the snow, cleared a soft layer. Shadow stepped forward and began digging again, methodical, fast, like he already knew. Within minutes, the snow gave way to fabric. Daniel cleared more, until a pale face emerged. A girl. Maybe 9 years old. Frozen in place, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Not Emily. Someone else. Daniel radioed in again. Marking coordinates. Second child found, deceased. Confirming more than one victim. This site was used before. The voice on the other end cracked with urgency. Understood. Chopper inbound. Full team deploying. As Daniel waited, he laid a blanket over Emily and lit the emergency heater to fight off the wind. Shadow curled beside them. Emily spoke again, her voice a whisper. They told me I'd be next if I didn't stay quiet. But I remembered what you said, before I got lost. Daniel looked at her. What did I say? She smiled faintly. That you and Shadow would find me. No matter what. Daniel felt something hard in his throat. He reached over and squeezed her hand. You were brave, he said. You left us a trail. She looked toward the trees. I didn't make the footprints. Daniel froze. You didn't? Emily shook her head. I was carried. I never touched the ground until the shack. Daniel turned to Shadow, who was staring at the spot where the footprints had disappeared. They were never Emily's. They were hers. The woman in white. The one who had made a game of it. Lured the rescue closer. Led them to the wrong place on purpose. Daniel stood up, breath tight in his chest. They hadn't just found Emily. They had found a system. And someone, or multiple someones, was still out there. The rescue team arrived minutes later, their lights carving through the snowfall like searchlights from another world. Medics rushed to Emily, gently checking her vitals, wrapping her in layers of warmth. Daniel gave the team coordinates to Mark. There's another girl under the drift. And there may be more victims. The lead agent looked at him grimly. How long do you think this has been going on? Daniel didn't answer. He just looked down at Shadow, who was still staring into the trees. Still listening. Because even now, something was moving.